Okay, so I just got done reading an excerpt from, or a little bit from my book that I got recently about emotionally immature parents. And how the series is going to go is I'm just going to, if I have like an epiphany or some thoughts about what I've seen in the book, I'm just going to talk about them here. And, you know, make sure you go check the other little link, because this is the second part. Okay, so I have finally figured out why my mother is the way she is to me. Because quite honestly, I have a stepdad who's just that, a stepdad, really didn't do anything growing up. And then I have my biological father who's, I love him, but kind of emotionally distant, but that's okay. That's just him, and that's my expectation for him. And mainly the issue I have is with my mom. And I realized that because I could reflect on my own behavior and reflect on myself a lot, especially with being trans and coming to grips with my identity, my mother was extremely jealous of the fact that I showed more emotional maturity than she could in her entire lifetime. Okay, I'm going to read a little bit from this, and if your parent has one or more of these, you're probably dealing with an immature parent. Okay. My parent often overreacts to relatively minor things. My parents didn't express much empathy or emotional awareness. Yeah, my mom was like that. When it came to emotional closeness and feelings, my parents seemed uncomfortable and didn't go there. I would try to tell my mom how I was feeling about, I don't know, stuff in school and stuff like that. And she would say things like, I have 8 children and your problems are as deep as a plate full of piss, and I can't deal with that right now. My parents were often irritated by individual differences or different points of view. My mother could not stand if anybody had a different point of view than her. It was either her way or the highway. When I was growing up, my parents used me as a confidant, but wasn't a confidant for me. Well, somebody was going through withdrawals from something, and I, at 14, had to take care of her, and then when I would bring this stuff up, she would act like I only did a minuscule amount for her. So, yeah. And then when stuff would happen with me, she didn't want nothing to do with it. Anywho, my parents often said or did things without thinking about other people's feelings. Oh, my mother would make jokes at your expense, like, and just be really a giant bully. I didn't get much attention or sympathy from my parents, except for maybe when I was really sick. And my mother used to justify that with saying, well, you're one of 8 children, and you're one of the oldest, so you can wait. My parents were inconsistent, sometimes wise and sometimes unreasonable. My mother could give the best advice when it came to, like, superficial things, but just did not know how to handle anything else. And it was kind of weird growing up. If I became upset, my parents either said something superficial and unhelpful, or just got angry and sarcastic. And I can think of a good situation with this one. When I was first dating my husband, I wanted to visit the state in which I live in now because I wanted to see what it was like, because I grew up in the upper part of New England and I live in the lower part of New England. And I told my mom that I was going to go for the weekend and just, you know, see what it was like. And instead of saying, oh, goodbye, have a good time, make sure you're safe, you know, the normal, typical parent response, she just shrugged her shoulders and said, see ya. And it was in that moment I knew that I needed to get the hell out. Because that was weird. Conversations mostly centered around my parents' interests. When we were at the dining room table, none of us were allowed to speak, and only she and my stepdad were allowed to speak because we talked too much and what we had to say wasn't interesting enough. Even polite disagreements could make my parents very defensive, and my mom was the queen of that. You would slightly disagree with her on things like, I don't know, cleaning the floor, and she would just blow up in your face. It was deflating to tell my parents about my success because it didn't seem to matter. Especially, like, when me playing the guitar and learning how to play, I would tell my parents about, especially my mom, about my interest, and it just, nope, didn't matter. It only was my stepfather's kids that mattered. Facts and logics were no match for my parents' opinions. Well, seeing how I'm an atheistic Satanist and she's a Christian. Anywho, my parents wasn't self-reflective and rarely looked at his or her role in the problem. Yeah, anytime I bring up any of this stuff to my mother in particular, my dad, he's like, yeah, I did some shit growing up that I'm not proud of when you were growing up, and I'm sorry for that. But my mother, she cannot accept anything she's done wrong, and will use things from when I was 16 to justify her actions. My parents tended to be black and white thinker and unreceptive to new ideas. Well, seeing how I'm non-binary and trans, yeah. So if your parents have one or more of these, you likely are dealing with an emotionally immature parent.